Hi, everyone, and welcome to July 2025. This is a powerful month of transition. Some fast, some slow, but all asking us to pay closer attention. The astrology this month pulls us in and then pushes us forward. It starts with sudden shifts in relationships, ideas, and identity, then moves on to deeper reflection around purpose, discipline, and self expression. Mercury and Neptune both go retrograde this month. We have a Capricorn full moon pushing us to get honest about our goals, and a new moon in Leo inviting us to have creative rebirth and some emotional resets. And of course, on the 7th of July, we have the biggest shakeup ever. And it's called a shakeup because it literally shakes you up. And this is Uranus going into Gemini. So have it where Gemini is in your whole sign house, and this will be the area that is going to be shaken up for the next 7 years. Uranus is a planet that causes massive change and disruption, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in a bad sense. But at the end of the transit, you'll be able to realize that that specific part of your life is completely different to how it was before. And at the end of the month, we have Chiron and Venus both changing directions. So, whether you're feeling energized, uncertain, or perhaps a little bit somewhere in between, July offers space to have a reset, not just in what you're doing, but how you're showing up in the world. So let's walk through it week by week. Hi, I'm Lisa Schneider, a tropical Western astrologer, and it's an absolute pleasure being here with you. So if you like these type of videos, please make sure to like, subscribe, or even share on to someone that may appreciate it. So let's see what July has in store for us. So first of all, Venus forms a tight conjunction with Uranus in Taurus on the 4th of July. This is both a disruptive, unpredictable, and potentially even liberating kind of transit. Venus deals with things like relationships, finances, values, and even creativity. Taurus is her home sign and where she loves to be. So those themes are grounded in stability, comfort, and what we know we can specifically count on. But Uranus is the absolute wild card in astrology. It breaks the rules, disrupts patterns, and brings in sudden change. So, when these two planets meet up, something stable or familiar could perhaps become unstable and unfamiliar. And that may sound negative, but it really depends. So Uranus brings breakthroughs where we've been stuck. It can introduce new people, ideas, or situations that perhaps even shift your perspective, maybe even overnight. So, for example, you might realize that you're not aligned with your current financial goals or plans, or that a relationship dynamic needs to change, even though you thought it was absolutely fine a while back. So, you could also meet someone out of the blue or just completely in an unexpected way, or discover a new passion project that completely flips your priorities. So, the best way to work with this energy is to stay flexible and, of course, do not overreact. So, if something feels a little bit surprising, ask yourself whether it's pointing you to perhaps an area of life that needs more freedom, or maybe you need to be a little bit more authentic in that part of life. So, later on the same day, on the 4th, Venus changes signs and moves into Gemini. This brings a completely different flavor. Venus in Taurus was all about sensuality and stability, but Venus in Gemini is more curious and sociable and even mentally active. This is a shift toward more conversational and a flexible connection. In relationships, this might feel lighter or even a little bit more playful. So you may find yourself wanting to talk more, share ideas, or even explore different ways of relating to people on a one-on-one basis. This isn't about things that lock you down, but it's about exploring options and staying open and even learning from others around you. And on a creative sense, this could also be an amazing time to write, teach, or perhaps even experiment with anything that engages your mind. So, if you've been feeling a little bit creatively blocked, this energy might help you break through things and see things in a completely new and fresh perspective, or you perhaps collaborate ideas with something. But financially, Venus in Gemini can bring perhaps a little bit of impulsiveness. So you might be drawn to spending on things that stimulate the mind, because of course Mercury is all about the mind. So books, courses, tech, or even short trips. But just keep an eye on things like that, especially with a Venus-Uranus conjunction happening almost at the same time. And that combination can bring some spontaneity and some unplanned purchases or unexpected, maybe, expenses. And also on the 4th of July, Neptune stations retrograde in Aries. So Neptune retrograde once a year. And this is not allowed as Mars or Mercury in retrograde, but it's still absolutely meaningful. Mercury represents dreams, illusions, ideals, spiritual longing, and even sometimes confusion or avoidance. So while Neptune moves forward, we tend to absorb inspiration from inside sources without perhaps questioning it. But when it turns retrograde, the energy seems to go inwards a little bit. It's like the fog seems to thin a little bit, and we begin to notice what's real versus what we've been projecting or even romanticizing. And in Aries, Neptune's influence affects our sense of self, our drive, and even our identity. So this retrograde can make us question what we've been chasing all along. Are our goals truly ours, or are they based on outdated versions of maybe who we thought we should be? So, for example, maybe you've been putting energy into a certain life path, professionally or even personally, because it seemed inspiring. But now you may start to realize that it's really not aligned with your sense of self anymore. And that clarity might not come all at once, but the questions start to perhaps bubble to the surface. So this is an amazing time to reflect, journal, and allow for some uncertainty. The answers will come, but of course you have to be honest with yourself in return. And then on the 7th of July, we get one of the biggest shifts of the entire year. Uranus enters Gemini. This is a long-term transit. Uranus stays in a sign for about 7 years, so this is life-altering. So we're entering into a brand new era in terms of collective energy and even collective themes. Gemini rules communication, learning, language, information, and even mental patterns. And Uranus brings complete and utter innovation, disruption, and massive acceleration forward. So when Uranus moves into Gemini, we can expect massive changes in how we think, communicate with others, and how we process information on a whole. Historically, Uranus in Gemini is associated with periods of massive technological advancements, media revelations, and absolutely enormous shifts in education and even thought. This could mean everything from breakthroughs in AI and even digital communication to changes in how we learn and even interact with others on a one-on-one or social basis. So expect new platforms, social platforms in particular, faster way of processing information, and a general push toward mental flexibility. On a personal level, this might stir up a strong desire to question old beliefs and habits and even like shake up the status quo to how you've thought about things in a long time. So you may feel a push to explore new topics, challenge how you think, or even completely overhaul how you speak or write. So if you've been mentally stuck, this is the kind of energy that can snap you right out of it. And in the first week of the transit, you might feel it completely, but pay close attention to sudden ideas or unexpected conversations with others, or even a strong urge to learn something brand new. These are all cues pointing you to how this energy wants to move you through this particular era of your life. The full moon in Capricorn is on the 10th of July, and this brings clarity and release. When a full moon lands in Capricorn, it brings our attention to our long-term goals and structure and responsibility, as it's ruled by the planet Saturn. This moon asks us to zoom out and look where you're heading. It's not just what's happening today or this week, but what kind of a foundation that you're ultimately building. So are your actions supporting your future or actually where you want to go? Or have you been keeping up with your commitments and habits that perhaps no longer align with your own personal growth? Capricorn energy doesn't shy away from reality. It won't sugarcoat things, and it doesn't let us off the hook with anything. That's why this specific full moon can feel perhaps even a little bit heavy. It puts pressure on places that perhaps we've been overcommitted to, or where we've been trying to hold on to something or trying to hold something together that's not even working anymore. But that pressure can perhaps be a little bit useful if you think about it. It brings up things to the surface so that we can deal with them in an honest way. This is an incredible time to check in with your own personal goals and ask questions like, is this path still for me? Is this system that I'm operating in, the routine, the job, the relationship, or even the internal expectation that I placed on myself still worth the effort? And if not, this full moon is a moment to start letting go and realigning of the things that don't matter to you anymore. So on the 13th of July, Saturn stations retrograde in Aries. And that layers even more of a reflective energy onto this specific week. Saturn is the planet of discipline, boundaries, time, and even structure. Aries is fast, instinctive, and self-directive. So when Saturn goes retrograde in Aries, it asks us to pause and consider whether the moves that we've been making are truly intentional or perhaps even a little bit reactive. This retrograde isn't about punishment or delays, but it can feel like it if we perhaps hitting a wall. But it's more about responsibility, not the kind that you inherit from others or perform out of obligation, but the kind that comes from knowing your limits and choosing your own personal path consciously. So if you've been charging ahead just to stay in motion, or making decisions without thinking them through properly, Saturn in retrograde is going to ask you to slow that momentum down. It's here to help you get clear, to ask what's motivating your action. Is this really the right move? Or are you trying to prove something, escape something, or perhaps even outpace discomfort? Saturn retrograde in Aries reminds us that real leadership of your own life, within your own relationship, comes from a grounded purpose, not just moving forward for the sake of it. And with the full moon in Capricorn and Saturn turning retrograde just a few days apart from each other, this whole week carries a sense of sober clarity. It's not dramatic, it's not chaotic, but it's very real. So you may feel a little bit more serious, more focused, or even a little bit tired. But these transits are working beneath the surface. They're trying to help you strip back the noise and realign with what matters most. So if you've been overextending yourself or holding onto a version that perhaps is no longer fulfilling, this is your cue to make the adjustments that you need in your life. Not adding more, but redefining what's really on your plate. There's also maturity in this week. Not about hustling harder or pushing through resistance, but it's about getting honest. And that honesty to what you are truly building and where you truly need to make the changes in your habits, boundaries, or even commitments so your future can actually support what suits you best in your life. So maybe you've been realizing that a project needs to be delayed so you can do it properly. Or maybe you decide that a relationship needs more structure or even a little bit more space. Or maybe you need to admit that something isn't working anymore and it's time to let it go. The truth is that some weeks aren't just about big actions, and other weeks are about internal alignment. And this is just one of those weeks. But of course, the momentum will return. But for now, let yourself slow down and check in with yourself and the direction that you're taking. Reflect on what needs to be released and deserves your energy and what kind of future that you are consciously building. So let's take a look at the energy of the week from the 15th through to the 21st of July, because things even slow down again. But this time, it's time to focus on your voice and how you express yourself, how you communicate, and whether you're truly being heard. This week is all about reflection, especially when it comes to self-expression. And that's because we've got Mercury going retrograde in Leo on the 18th of July. And just a few days later, the Sun enters Leo on the 22nd, officially kicking Leo season off. It's a week of reviewing how we show up in our creative sense and personally, and adjusting, of course, what feels no longer aligned. So let's start with Mercury retrograde in Leo on the 18th of July. Now, most of us are familiar with the classic Mercury in retrograde effects, which of course are delays, tech mishaps, and miscommunication, maybe things breaking down or needing revision. And yes, of course, that's all part of it. But this one has an added layer because it's happening in Leo, which of course governs your expression, identity, creativity, confidence, and the way that you want to be seen. Mercury retrograde here may stir up old doubts about whether your voice really matters. It might have you second guessing the way you've been presenting yourself, whether your work or appearance, or even your social media presence, or even your actual voice has been seen. You might even find yourself revisiting old projects, reworking creative content, or hearing from people that you thought were long gone. The past has a way of resurfacing during Mercury retrograde, not to drag you backwards, but to perhaps offer you a layer of insight. So there's usually something unresolved or something that you perhaps now have clarity and the maturity to handle differently. This is also an incredible time to take a break from perhaps even overperforming. So if you've been pushing to be seen or trying to keep up an image that doesn't feel true to you anymore, this particular retrograde could show you where that's wearing a little bit thin. It's a time to step back, not to disappear, but to listen. Listen to your own voice, your own timing, and your own personal truth. And here's the thing, Mercury retrograde doesn't always bring clarity absolutely instantly. It often does the opposite. At first, things can feel a little bit confusing or even a little bit out of sync. But if you give it time and stop trying to force the answers, clarity tends to arrive in its natural way. This is an incredible week to journal, to edit your words before reacting, and to allow conversations to unfold more slowly than usual. So you don't need to jump to conclusions, just need to pay attention to maybe what keeps repeating and where there's space to rethink your message or your delivery, do that. And on the 22nd of July, the Sun moves into Leo, and this officially starts Leo season. And this brings a totally different tone. Leo season is bold, expressive, and passionate, and focused on personal truth. It encourages you to step forward and to be seen, but only when that expression is rooted in authenticity. The Sun in Leo also helps us reconnect with our confidence, joy, and creativity. It says, this is your life, so take space in it. But the shadow of Leo is overperformance and trying to gain approval by perhaps playing a role that is simply not being yourself. And that's why the timing of the shift is so interesting. With Mercury retrograde also in Leo, the message is absolutely clear. Don't just speak to be heard. Speak because it's real. Don't just create to impress. Create because you mean it. Leo season is often thought of as a time to shine, and of course it is. But your light shines best when it comes from a place of honesty and not pressure. This is your chance to lead with your heart. But first, you may need to try strip back a few layers of performance and perfectionism, or perhaps fear of being misunderstood. This is a week that may stir up some insecurities, especially around your visibility, self-worth, or perhaps being misinterpreted. And this is completely normal. Mercury retrograde tends to pull back those inner stories to surface so you can face them with more awareness. So if old fears come up, fears about not being good enough, not being noticed, or being judged, don't try to silence them. Let them move through you and let them teach you something about perhaps what you've been carrying and how you want to move forward from this moment on. Because the truth is, self-expression isn't about being perfect. It's about getting honest. And sometimes honesty is messy or even a little bit vulnerable. And that's okay. In fact, it's usually where the most meaningful growth actually happens. So this is a week to pause, and it's a chance to reflect on how you communicate, how you create, and how you want to keep showing up and moving forward in this world. So take time to rethink, recharge, and perhaps rethink your message. Reclaim your confidence from a place that's more rooted than self-image. And remember that being real is more powerful than being absolutely polished. All right, we're in the heart of Leo season now. And the energy of this week invites us for perhaps a quieter kind of intentional week. On July the 24th, we have a brand new moon in Leo. And as always with new moons, this is the time of fresh beginnings, but not necessarily loud beginnings. This isn't the week to go full speed ahead or to make grand announcements. Mercury is still retrograde, so things are still shifting behind the scenes. Instead, this is a week to turn inwards and ask yourself, how do I want to show up? What part of me am I ready to share more honestly to the world? What kind of present actually feels aligned with perhaps whom I'm becoming? Leo season is all about courage and visibility, but the kind that comes from deep self-trust, not ego, and not perfectionism. This new moon asks you to reconnect with your core, with your creativity, with your purpose and your voice. Not the voice that you think people want to hear, but the one that is already yours, even if it's a little bit unpolished. It's about letting yourself lead with the heart, even if you're not quite sure where it's going. So you don't have to know the entire plan. You don't have to get it all right at the same time. What you do need is a little bit of clarity on what's true for you right now. What you're ready to commit to, not for validation, but because it matters to you. And that be returning to a forgotten creative idea, setting a boundary that protects your energy, or perhaps even simply taking up space again in a way that feels real and authentic. This isn't about rushing. It's about starting fresh and slowly and absolutely consciously. And on the 30th of July, Chiron stations retrograde in Aries, which can bring up old wounds around identity, courage, and even self-worth. This can feel a little raw, and honestly, it might stir up feelings that you thought you were perhaps done with. But it doesn't mean something is wrong. Sometimes healing circles back to help you see it a little bit differently. Chiron retrograde isn't about fixing things right away. It's about giving yourself the permission you need to feel where the cracks are and to tend to them in a slow way. So you don't have to have all the answers. You don't need to do anything heroic. You just need to notice what's asking for care and make a little space for it. This can be a tender few days, but it's also a very, very meaningful one. Think of it as a gentle reset. And then on the 31st of July, we get the two final shifts to close out the month. So first of all, Venus moves into Cancer, bringing softness and emotional depth to how we relate to both others and even ourselves. In Cancer, Venus is more intuitive and more protective and more nurturing. So this is an incredible time to prioritize what feels safe and supportive to you. So you might feel the urge to pull back from surface level connections and to really lean into relationships that offer real connection and, of course, real care. Financially, this energy can also guide you to spend in ways that feel comforting, perhaps home orientated. So you may look at investing in your space, your body, or even your sense of security. Also on the 31st, the Sun meets up with Mercury in Leo, a moment of clarity right in the middle of Mercury retrograde. These two coming together in a conjunction is called a Cazimi, and it represents a reset or a kind of a revelation. So something clicks, a conversation lands, or perhaps even a personal insight becomes more clear. So it might not be a massive breakthrough, but it's something that gives you a new direction. So it can feel like you're turning on a light bulb in the inside and seeing a situation more clearly or how it actually is. Even if it's been quite confusing for a while, let it sit and simmer. So these last days in July are soft but powerful, and you've been asked to slow down, reflect, and listen to what's really real in your life. Not what you're performing, not what you feel that should be done. Just what's honest and what's ready to be felt and heard. And if you've been moving too fast, this is a reminder that rest is not the opposite of progress, it's actually part of it. Reflection is action too. So take your time and don't push anything to make it happen. You just need to notice what's arising and let yourself respond with compassion and, of course, care. So thanks for being here. If you've been tuning in every single week of this month to your own self, you'll understand these themes of the month. And it's all about realignment this month because there's so many retrogrades. So trust what's unfolding, and I'll see you soon in August for a completely new chapter. That's it for July. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, please remember to subscribe and perhaps share on with someone that may appreciate it. If you have a look below in the description, all of the links will be there to a full written horoscope specifically for your sign that perhaps even much more in depth than this specific video. So hope to see you there, and thanks for tuning in. Bye.